Authors Dr. Patricia Martin and Helene Houston, an advanced practical nurse, believe the notion that retirement is a time without purpose or meaning needs to change. They interviewed several people from the region, including WGBY's own Jim Madigan, about their experiences. And they spoke with me in the studio about their new book, Welcome to Retirement.
In my clinical practice as a psychologist, I have heard more and more people coming in asking me, when do I retire? Why do I retire? What am I going to do with those 40 extra hours a week? And so Helene and I both decided, being in our 60s and 70s, it was a time to write this book.
And why did you want to work on it together?
I thought we did very well with our first book about the other couch, and we are true believers in people's stories. And we thought we would deal with this book in a similar way, to asking people to tell their stories. And I had just met so many really inspiring people who have the most interesting lives later in life. And I thought they could all be represented.
Right. And we work well together.
Yeah. And to that point about stories, we hear 40 different stories from people in this book, including our own late Jim Madigan, who you spoke with about his unexpected retirement, really. He, in the book, tells you that he had no intention to retire at 65, but because of his health, he chose to make that decision. How did you come to profile Jim?
Well, I have done Connecting Point and other stories, and I really do have a very strong affection for Jim Madigan. And when I called Jim and wanted to let him know, one, my father had died with pulmonary fibrosis, so I would help him in any way I could. I also said, Jim, I'm writing a book. I'd love to profile you. And he actually said to me, Pat, you know, I'm kind of private. I'm not sure.
That does not surprise me at all. I was actually very surprised when I learned that Jim agreed to the interview because of that. He was so private. So what did you do to convince him?
Well, I didn't do anything except kept in touch with him, just making sure how he was doing. And then he called me about 3 months later and said, you know what, Pat, I want to do it. And I told him, Jim, I really want to honor your career, and I want to tell a story of how courageously you are facing what you're facing now. And I also said it will be helpful to other people who may retire due to illness. So I really had the honor to meet Jim and Lena at their house and interview him.
Yeah.
And after he okayed the story, he died within 3 weeks.
And one of the things that you say in the book is, and I'm quoting here, although not the retirement he would have planned, Jim and Lena, his wife, faced the future together with love, faith, and courage. And so, do you think that in your both professional experience, having that other person, whether it's a spouse or a sounding board, does that help with the retirement process?
Of course it does, having a loving spouse, but talk about the socialization piece.
One thing that I learned, and it was really kind of a surprise, because they've done all kinds of research at the University of San Diego, that social engagement is the greatest predictor of longevity of any of the factors. And Patsy is a wonderful exercise buff. She is so fit. I have never particularly liked exercise, but I do socialize pretty well.
Yeah, she's a social queen.
So that made me feel really good to know how important it is to have connectivity with people.
Because in your regular workday, you're interacting with people, whether you choose to or not sometimes. And so that piece of remembering, okay, I might be taking a next step, stepping away from these 40 hours prescribed and doing X, Y, or Z. But I need to communicate with people still.
And they're all different ways of retiring. I mean, I was just talking about this with people yesterday. I'm what they call a continuer. I still work 1 day a week. I love the people I work with. And that keeps me going. They're young. I love being with younger people. And that's another thing. They say make friends who are younger than you are. Because sadly, a lot of people pass away, and it's nice to know that there's a network of other people who maybe you can be the mentor to.
And that's one of the things that you point out in the book, is that baby boomers are approaching retirement in a way that's very different than we had seen here in the United States before. And you point out, I think it's 6 different categories of people that you've encountered.
Yes, yeah.
But do you find that there's one group in particular of those 6 that's maybe faring better than others, or is it all just different?
Well, the ones that aren't faring so well, and Nancy Schlossberg developed these categories, are the retreaters. And these are the people who just disengage and are isolated. And I was just giving a talk at my work, and one of the young women said her father had been a police officer, and he has no hobbies. He retired, and he's doing nothing. And she's very worried about him.
Well, what's interesting, the word retire comes from a French word retirer, which means to withdraw.
Right.
Not a good idea. Don't withdraw. Instead of retire, re-engage, re-enter, in some way make something new of this next third act of your life. That's what we support, and what the research is also really documenting is that staying physically healthy, exercising, socially engaging. Another piece is having fun. Don't take fun out of the formula.
Right.
And just because we age doesn't mean we have to get old, you know?
It might be also looking at something that you did before, whether it's exercise or engaging with people in a slightly different way. Maybe you can't drive as far. Maybe you don't run as many miles as you used to. But adjusting that schedule in some way.
That's right.
Right, with silver sneakers is at many gyms. And what is the age? Is it over 55, 60?
Yeah.
And, it's just like, so you're doing a workout, but you're doing it in a modified way. So 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day of just getting up and moving around is good.
Social.
And it's social. And
These
it's
people
social.
come back constantly.
One of the things that really stood out to me in the book is I think you think about retirement, you talk about retirement, and finances are usually one of the first things, if not the first thing, that comes to people's mind. And you do touch on that in the book, but I was very surprised. I thought it would be chapter 1, and it's not.
No.
Why did you take that approach?
There are 50,000 books on financing of your retirement. And to be honest, you don't hear about how much money you have keeps you alive longer. It's important for safety and.
We include financial, but it's only one of the 8 dimensions we talk about, because we think more books need to be written about the psychological well-being of retirement. Financial is important. There's 100 other books to pick from. But when we did the lit review, there weren't books that looked at this multi-dimensional aspect of retirement from a wellness perspective.
And to that point about the wellness perspective, is there one person for each of you in the book that stands out as someone who's taking an approach that really sticks with you?
Well, at one of the talks I just gave, I read Vanessa O'Brien's chapter, the last woman in the book, who's a friend of mine who's 99. And she represents all the dimensions of wellness. And that, I think if ever I do this talk by myself, that's the chapter I want to read.
Well, that's wonderful. It's hard for me to select one because every single person was inspirational to me. There was a colleague of mine, a male, who was a car salesman, and I call his chapter From Subaru to Shakespeare.
Right.
He retired, sold his car businesses, and he went and got an MFA and is a Shakespearean actor now. That's taking a creative wellness turn. And he said to me, Pat, I always wanted to do this, but I had to support my family. So now I get the opportunity. So sometimes retirement can be that rebirth. I like to think of us, rather than retirees, as perennials. People who now are coming back in a different way, in a different form.